In the Western media, we're bombarded with frightening and negative images of Islam every day. Islam is often depicted as a threatening force connected with unbending fundamentalism, repression, or terrorism. Alongside that, there is the disapproval or outright banning of music by the fundamentalists. But there is another strand of Islam, where music is placed at the heart of religious devotion. Sufism is the popular, mystical form of Islam, with millions of followers around the world. When I first moved to South Asia 20 years ago, Sufism was a revelation to me and overturned all my preconceptions about Islam. It's peace-loving, tolerant, and pluralistic.
Sufism is an antidote to all the negative stereotypes of Islam. Since the very earliest days of the faith, the Sufis have produced some of the most beautiful art, poetry, and music. Like the troubadours of the medieval West, they've spread their word through music, and although always opposed by the Orthodox and by Puritans, they still are hugely popular across the Islamic world. This is a journey to the other side of Islam.
Sain Zahor is a sort of holy minstrel who sings in praise of God at Sufi shrines in Pakistan. The paths of love are long and complicated, he sings, for it is love rather than fear of God that lies at the heart of Sufism. But the use of music brings condemnation from Islamic hardliners who, like the English Puritans of the 17th century, see music as a distraction from God.
But there's actually nothing in the Quran which specifically forbids music, and later Muslim writings on the subject are sufficiently ambiguous for there to have been hundreds of years of discussion. But for the Sufis, music and poetry remain intrinsic to their faith. It's their way of drawing closer to God and so reaching a state of spiritual ecstasy.
Across the Islamic world, Sufi music takes many very different forms. It fuses with local traditions to form widely varying regional colours and sounds. In this programme, I'm going to explore the roots of this extraordinary musical force and see some of the highlights of Sufi music in action. It's music that has also attracted millions of non-Muslim fans, thanks to its thrilling, ecstatic power. Exactly when and where Sufism began is difficult to say, but Islam and Christianity evolved from much the same roots in the same place, the deserts and villages of the Middle East. Here in Syria, in the Byzantine period, Christian hermits came in droves to live in caves, to wander in the desert, and to sit on pillars as stylites. By dint of their suffering, these saints were seen to have won direct access to the divine.
After the Islamic conquest and the conversion of Syria, people continued to expect their holy men to behave in this manner, and the very word Sufi seems to hint at this direct continuity with Christianity. For Suf is the Arabic word for wool, a reference to the clothing worn by the Desert Fathers and taken over from them by the very first Sufis.
It's often forgotten that Islam adopted a lot from the early Christians. The month-long Lenten feast became Ramadan, and the practice of removing shoes before entering a shrine. Here, at the Christian convent of Saydnaya, Muslims also come to pray, and you can see this confluence of religions in action. while Orthodox Muslims believe God should only be approached directly through prayers in the mosque, the Sufis often feel more comfortable going through the intermediary of a saint, in this case, the Virgin Mary. Now, in the world of the clash of civilizations and the neocons and 9/11 and so on, all this seems something extraordinary, but it is, of course, the old way in the Middle East. Muslims and Christians and Sephardic Jews have been sharing shrines and venerating the same holy men for centuries. It's here, in this wonderfully plural culture compost of the Middle East, that Sufism has its roots. The first Sufis were hermits in the desert, but by the 8th century they'd gathered in the new Muslim towns. There are written records of these early Sufi brotherhoods surviving, showing that they already used music in their devotions. I've come to the city of Aleppo in the north of Syria. It's a place where there are literally hundreds of Sufi lodges tucked away in the winding streets of the old city. Here you can get some idea of what the chanting and rituals of these first Sufi brotherhoods might have sounded like. On different days of the week in Aleppo, different Sufi brotherhoods hold what they call a zikr, literally a remembrance of God, with prayers, chanting and drumming. Though it may all sound a bit like a rugby warm-up song, it's going back to the deepest roots of Sufism. Instruments are stripped away, and God's name is repeated over and over again. What's interesting is that it is, of course, a link with early Christian monasticism, the Byzantine monks, for whom the Jesus prayer, repeating Jesus' name over and over again, was at the very center of their spirituality. In the next part of my journey, I'm off to find out about Rumi, the mystic who's best known for spreading the Sufi message worldwide. In Konya, a small town in Turkey, is the shrine of the Sufi mystic who, above all others, has come to represent the ideals of Sufism worldwide. He is Jalaluddin Rumi, or Mevlana, which means our Lord. He was born in what is now Afghanistan, but made Konya his home in the mid-13th century. His shrine and tomb here attract pilgrims from all over the world. While remaining a sincere Muslim, Rumi emphasized that rituals and fasting were for the pious, but love was everywhere, and was much the surest route to the divine. The fact that Rumi was the best-selling poet in America in the 1990s is an indication of his contemporary appeal.
Rumi's message is timeless. I mean, he lived in the 13th century, but today, all around the world, his books are translated and spreading because he thinks about forgiveness, peace, and self-understanding, self-respect. And I think when you look what's going on today around the world, more than ever, it's very applicable for everyone. It doesn't matter what's your cultural background.
Rumi has always been the most universal of Muslim thinkers. In all his writings, you have this idea that as God is located in the human heart, you don't need ritual to get to him, that he's as accessible to Christians and to Jews as he is to Muslims.
Rumi's followers, the Mevlevi Sufis, spread to Istanbul and throughout the Ottoman Empire. They became better known around the world as the whirling dervishes. Their whirling rituals were intended to focus their minds on the God within.